Hey there! I asked people a while ago on Instagram what they wanted me to talk about, and some very interesting questions came up. I've covered a bunch of these, but today I thought we'd talk about this one, and I don't know how much I have to say about this, but I think it was an interesting question. How do your varied interests complement each other rather than compete? Well, that's a profound question. And I'll try to answer that in two ways. I will talk about it a little bit from my personal interests, and I'll also talk a little bit about from a professional viewpoint from my field. Let's start off with personal stuff. What do I like? Well, I like fountain pens, otherwise, this whole channel would not exist. But there are other things I like. I like going out into nature. I like hiking. I like Stoicism. I had something, a hair just fell right in front of my, there we go, I think. I like Stoicism. I like samurai culture. I like art, especially painting. I really have a soft spot for medieval painters and German romantics. I like different things. How do these interests not compete with each other? Well, sometimes you can combine them. For example, if someone were to launch a fountain pen that actually is telescopic and you can use it as a hiking pole, but it also has a German romantic painting on it, that would be unified. But let's be fair, that doesn't happen so often, that so many interests overlap, although it can. I have a friend in the Netherlands, Marco, and Marco loves owls, and he also has pens that have owls painted on them, many of them very artistic, quite fancy pens. So there certainly are situations imaginable where different interests overlap. Think of that very expensive Monte Grappa samurai pen. Well, if I like samurai culture, you would have to save up for that. I think it's a 15,000 euro pen or something. But theoretically, you could buy that and you could have a unification of your interests. I find, and this is going to be, I feel that this is a really disappointing answer, but I feel there's a time and place for everything. I live in Canada now, and I live in a place where in winter it can be minus 40 Celsius or Fahrenheit. Take your pick, because at that point they're the same. And I'll tell you now, that is extremely cold, especially when there's a bit of wind out. It can feel like minus 50, it can feel like minus 55. So in winter, going out on a hike may not always be possible. You can go snowshoeing, and that's fun too, but sometimes when it's minus 40, that's hazardous. You actually put yourself in danger. So in a case like that, well, if that's the case, then I can sit here and I can read, or I can do something else that's an indoor activity, like play with fountain pens. In summer, things may change a bit, and then you may focus some more time on going out into the mountains and hiking and all those sort of things, and then maybe pens are a little less important. So that's really the way I look at it. I think that for me, overarching statement that I get the feeling people find interesting when I talk about how I view things. So here you go. An overarching statement for me is, if you choose to do something, then you have to commit to that thing. And this is by no means always easy. But speaking of simple, innocent things like hobbies, I'm not talking about profound cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not talking about those situations. Right now I'm just talking about hobbies. And you have to commit. If you find fountain pens interesting, then actually learn about them. Maybe buy a book, Peter Twiddle's on fountain pens. No, it's just called Fountain Pens, I think. Fantastic book, not super thick. You could read it in a week easily, and you've learned a lot about fountain pens. If you find, let's take another one, Stoicism interesting, then actually read about Stoicism. Don't just read snippets of that was deformation of data analysis coding. Don't read quotations online, but get a book and read that book. And then learn about that thing. I have found, as I am about to enter my 5th decade of life, which is slightly terrifying, but I mean, I'm about to turn 40, I've found that whatever it is I do, it's more satisfying to me when I actually spend time with that thing. And that means effort. And I've always had that as a kid too. I went through phases, interested in pirates, but then I wanted to read everything I could about pirates, or the Wild West or space or dinosaurs, whatever, as kids do. But that stayed with me. And I think that is the more important thing. It doesn't matter what your interests are and how they may compete. What matters is how you approach those interests. And when you commit to something and you actually learn about it, it becomes more enjoyable. If you really learn about how fountain pens work and different materials and its history, I think it is more enjoyable than if you just buy 20 pens and you use them. To me. But I'm kind of a cognitive person that way. Different people might be different, but still, I would say consider that. Actually learn something about it. Now, in some cases, there isn't that much to learn, like hiking. You do it. You go out and you... But you can learn about different trees or different birds or both or whatever. And that can be a lot of fun too. If you're interested in Stoicism, and actually read about Stoicism. If you're interested in samurai culture, then read about samurai culture. And if you like architecture, then read about architecture. And the next time you run to a Gothic cathedral, you will understand that building a lot better than you would if you had absolutely no preparation. You walk through city in Germany, France, UK, wherever, you find a Gothic cathedral and you think, oh, that's a really big building. Where's the nearest ice cream parlor? Like that, I'm not judging, I'm just saying. You can get a lot out of the world, but you have to feed that curiosity. And I find that I'm curious about a lot of things. Now, I told you I was also going to talk a little bit about this from a more professional viewpoint. So I'm a psychologist, not a clinical psychologist. I'm a cognitive psychologist. I like thought processes and brains. And I have found throughout the years, kind of starting in my undergraduate, late phase of my undergraduate work, but then all the way down to graduate work, master's, PhD. Now I teach at a post-secondary institution. I find that I am incredibly attracted to cognitive neuroscience. I find it very, very sexy and very hot to read about cognitive neuroscience because you learn about the brain. Our most complicated organ, almost impossible to dissect because it's so floppy. But so complicated, and it's so fascinating. And one of the things I try to instill in the students that I have the privilege of teaching is, are you not fascinated by this? Does it not blow your mind how people fall in love, or how they even see something or hear something? Incredibly complicated processes. And many of these processes we understand better and better and better with every year that passes. That's my interest. And I think that if you apply yourself to an interest like that, learn everything you can about it, so much more of the world starts to make sense. I teach a course, I haven't taught it, I think 2 years now, but I used to teach a course, and I hope to teach it again in the future, called Sensation and Perception. It's about the cognitive neuroscience of the senses. Difficult course, because whenever there's neuroscience, it's hard, it's difficult. But students often leave that course and they say, this was so interesting. I just thought, you open your eyes, you see something. I didn't know the whole neural process behind it, but it's so complicated, but it's so cool. And the same thing with hearing and smelling and tasting and touching and pain, all that kind of stuff. Super interesting. And when you apply yourself to that, the world will start to make more sense because you understand life on a whole different level. And I think that is completely worth it. Another thing that I teach is statistics. And that's not statistics as in like 3 out of 4 people own a red car or something. It's statistics that deal with how do you establish whether there is a reliable difference between the scores in this group and the scores in that group, for example. And that's a course students tend to not enjoy taking. They don't like because it's difficult and it's math, and when I'm dealing with social science students, they typically don't like math very much. But when you apply yourself to that material, you actually learn to see patterns in the universe, in human life, in behavior, that otherwise you would have missed. And that's intensely rewarding. But to be able to do that, you have to apply yourself to it. I've read a lot of books on statistics because when you teach something, you have to study that material. And for the fun of it, I added up the pages and I realized I have read 12,500 pages on statistics. That's a lot of, think of it, that's a lot of pages. But it makes your understanding of something crisper and crisper. And what you will find is that things that at some point completely defeated you, you had no idea how they worked, you couldn't understand them. Now you read them and it's just like that. You say, of course, that's the sampling distribution of the mean. This makes complete sense to me. but that takes effort. So for me, the question is not so much how do your interests complement each other, because in one way or another they all do, because they're my interests and I'm me. So that by nature they complement me and each other. What matters more to me is how do you approach something. We live in a world now where people have short attention spans, where they don't read news articles, they read headlines. I don't want to say they don't watch movies, they watch trailers, but we're getting there. It's a shorter attention span. Apply yourself. Find something you find interesting and then take a deep dive. Go to the library, which is a place where they have a lot of books, because I'm not sure that that's entirely understood anymore. Or go to a bookstore and buy 2 books on that topic and then read them. And your mind will be blown. There is no limit to how much you can learn. And the more you learn about any topic, anything, whether it's a hobby or professional interest, the easier things become, the more sense they make, and the more rewarding they are. And that's what matters to me. I know a lot of things about a lot of things. I know a little bit about a lot of things. And I'm happy with that. I love reading textbooks. That's why I have the best job in the world, because I get to do that. I get paid for it to study more and more and more and more and more. But when you read something and it blows your mind, of like, this is how birds cache food, and it's reflected in the hippocampus in their brain, the size of that thing changes based on whether they cache food or not. That's insane. Anyway, note the enthusiasm. That was my answer to the question, and I hope you don't mind. I bent it a little bit. If you find, and I've seen this happen, one friend in particular I remember had a lot of different interests and it was too many, and her partner told her you shouldn't have that many, it's just too much. Whether the partner is entitled to say that or not, that's not the issue here. If that happens, if you find you're spending too much time on all your varied interests, well then cut it down a little bit. But I think for a lot of people that's not the case. You have so much time, you use it the way you see best fit. But I don't want to waste my life watching TV. I want to learn and understand the world as best as I can. Now we're talking. Okay, I hope this was useful. I hope you forgive me for bending the question a little bit. I hope I haven't bored you to death, because I'm serious when I say it every time I record a video like this. That's my biggest concern. Let me know what you think. How do your interests complement each other? Do they bite each other? How do you make sure they don't do that? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Thanks for the question. If you have any other questions, leave them below and I'll try to address them as soon as I can. Hope this was useful. I'll gladly see you later. Bye.